Hello, and welcome to Central Booking, where writers and readers are the authority. I'm your host, John Valeri. Today on Central Booking, Armando Muñoz is going to steal your heart right out of your chest, provided Harry Warden doesn't get to him first. An acclaimed horror scribe, Armando's newest release is My Bloody Valentine, the official novelization of the 1981 cult classic slasher film. Published by Stop the Killer and in collaboration with director George Mihalka, who also contributes the book's introduction, the novel melds Armando's own vision with Mihalka's and screenwriter John Baird, restoring material from the original script that was either scrapped, cut from the film's theatrical release, or lost to time. Consequently, it's the definitive and much expanded version of a cautionary tale that has terrified audiences for decades. If you don't know the story, it goes a little something like this. On Valentine's Day 1960, an explosion took the lives of 19 workers at Valentine Bluff's Hanniger mine in Nova Scotia. 1 year later, sole survivor Harry Warden returned to wreak bloody vengeance on those he deemed responsible for the tragedy, bringing to an end all celebrations of the holiday. Flash forward to 1981, the town is planning to resurrect Valentine's Day for the first time in 2 decades, but somebody has an axe to grind, more specifically a pickaxe. In addition to books, Armando writes and directs horror films, creates bloody special effects, and performs as DJ Pervula. His first novel, Hoarder, was called Dynamite, a sickening imaginative shocker by Fangoria magazine. He followed that up with Thanksgiving-themed Turkey Day and its sequel, Turkey Kitchen. A third and final entry in that saga is forthcoming, as is a short fiction collection and a second collaboration with Stop the Killer for the novelization of 1984's Silent Night, Deadly Night. Armando's body of work has earned an enthusiastic readership, including Clive Barker, who offered, "Your prose is beautifully crafted. You have an instinctive understanding of the complex challenges of horror storytelling. Consider me a new fan." Now, venture down to the Hanniger mine with me. Armando Muñoz is waiting there, and he's going to give you a bloody good Valentine's Day celebration. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Central Booking. Today, we have a special Bloody Valentine edition. I am so excited to be in the company of Armando Muñoz, who is the author of My Bloody Valentine. It is based on the 1981 original motion picture. So if my math isn't wrong, and that's a big if, that's like 42 years ago. So welcome to the show, Armando. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me to the show. Happy to be here.
You're straight from the mine. I mean, this is great.
Yeah, I'm broadcasting deep from Mile Underground in the Hanniger mine at Valentine Bluffs,
I love
Nova Scotia.
See, this is perfect. And all right, real quick, I'm going to move my camera and show people that I'm not totally dressed down for you. I'm actually wearing my new Fright Rags shirt, and there it is. Harry Warden, me to be his Bloody Valentine. But of course, the way the framing is, none of you can see that, but now you know.
Oh, I thought he picked me because when I came down to the mine today, I found somebody had left me this Valentine. So I think Harry Warden might be down here with me, ready to pick me now.
He's picking
us.
You
might be safe.
I guess if you pay the price, he'll pick you too. But you got the.
Oh, he'll pick us all.
Bloody
Before the holiday's over, he'll pick us all.
Yeah, that's right. This will be it. So I wanted to ask you. So as I mentioned, this is based on the film of the same name, which was released over 40 years ago. So it's interesting that there's this resurrection with the book. And I'm wondering, if you can tell us how your involvement in this project came about.
Well, thankfully, I've been a super fan of this movie since the mid-'80s, and my love for it is pretty well known. And that subgenre of the theme day holiday slashers is kind of my bread and butter. You could say it's what I always talk about. And with my prior novels, I have out of the 3 I've done, 2 of them are part of a Thanksgiving slasher series, an original series I wrote, Turkey Day, and then the follow-up Turkey Kitchen, and there will be a 3rd book at some point. And so, it's definitely out there that I love my theme day slashers. And the project, this particular novelization was spearheaded by Anthony Massey of Stop the Killer. and Massey Media, and he's created these recent board games, these very high quality board games. The first one was released just late last year. It was the Silent Night, Deadly Night, the game, based on the 1984 American slasher classic, Infamous, and followed it up with the My Bloody Valentine, the game. And yes, and so much fun, these board games. But he also kind of had this idea that the fans might want to re-experience these titles a different way. And he thought novelization, and him knowing, you know, those books from going way back. And thankfully, you know, he'd also read my debut novel, Hoarder, and liked what I did. And so he approached me about it. And I was very interested. I've wanted to do novelizations for years now. So this was definitely something I was looking to get involved with. But we had to get the approval of the director of the movie, George Mihalka, who's kind of very much also behind this particular novelization. And it was kind of their goal to create a book that utilized the original movie and the original screenplay, the John Beard screenplay, and kind of bring the full vision of what he always wanted My Bloody Valentine to be, which never, a lot of it made it up to the screen, and it made it up there well, which is why we're still talking about this movie and why we all love it 42 years later. But he didn't get to fully put everything on the screen that he wanted. And this was kind of an opportunity for him to right those wrongs. And, you know, some of that was the MPAA, of course, notoriously, you know, attacked this film with their censor scissors right before its release and cut all the good bloody parts out. But, you know, it was also a 90-minute studio mandated running time. And so a lot of material got, you know, left behind on the cutting room floor. And not all of it has made it back into future editions. Some of the gore has been found. About 70% apparently of the gore was found and put back into recent restorations. But all the other stuff, the character scenes and things, that stuff just has never reappeared. So he definitely wanted to give a full, complete vision of his ambition, you know, for the story. But I had to pitch my take on it as well, because this is a novel now. And it's a full book, and he needed a writer who was going to be both on the same page and who had a good approach to it. And so I definitely had a vision of how I wanted to approach this story and this book. And thankfully, we completely gelled right away. We were very much on the same page, so to speak, on the book we wanted to deliver. And we collaborated from that very first meeting all the way up to the day of printing. He's been fully involved in every step of the way, putting his seal of approval on this project, which I think is important for the fans who want to see this, you know, complete vision, you know, of his. So that's kind of how, you know, I had to go through, you know, get a few approvals to get to the spot, but thankfully they gave me that ability to go live in Valentine Bluffs for a while and come back and report on what I witnessed and saw. And that's,
I know, and then you get to take
I'm
us
still
on
trapped though. I'm still trapped in the mine. I can't find my way out.
You know, there's no leaving the mine. I mean, once you're there, that's kind of it.
I think so.
But you're doing better than some, so most.
So far, so far.
All right. And, you know, I keep thinking, all right, so we're 42 years away from, you know, the movie being released. Maybe by year 50, that extra 30% of footage will be found and we'll really get the true, you know, cinematic vision. I also would like to say, Anthony Massey, you were the man. It's like you're in our heads. You're giving us fans what we really, really want. So thank you for that. So let me ask you, you know, you mentioned that My Bloody Valentine was one of your favorite movies way back when. This is not something that you came to later in life. You know, you were much aware of it at the time. So I'm wondering if you can tell me what it was specifically about this movie or this story that spoke to you then and why it still resonates with you now.
Well, you know, I was lucky to see it at a younger age, at an impressionable age. I encountered this film at 13. You know, unfortunately, I did not get to see it first run, although I was fully aware of it when it hit theaters, but I was simply too young.
Sure.
And at the time of its release, I really did not like horror films. And that was really because of Friday the 13th. The prior year, that film, Friday the 13th, was my first R-rated movie in a theater. I was way too young to process that kind of content. And it just simply gave me nightmares for a couple of years. And when My Bloody Valentine followed on its heels about 8 months later, or maybe 9 months, I was aware enough not to get trapped again. Like nothing scared me more than theme day slasher films from Paramount Pictures. And so here's on the TV, you know, these ads for My Bloody Valentine. I was like, no way, not doing that. Cut a few years ahead in 1985, and I rented on VHS. I'm totally getting into horror, reading Fangoria and Stephen King obsessively just overnight. And it appealed to me, you know, it worked. I saw it at an age where it was scary for me to watch, and it was suspenseful, and it had dread and atmosphere, incredible atmosphere. And everything about it worked pretty much. The characters, I think for most people, I'd say it's the characters. We love these people that we're watching on screen. They're fun to be around. You're rooting for them, and they're very relatable. They're people we know. And so there's so many elements that made this movie work over the years. So it grabbed me. I always loved it. I always wanted to see that censored footage. Had to wait, you know, maybe 25 more years or you know, until the late, maybe I think it was 2008 when we finally got to see some of that grainy footage cut back into the film with the original Lionsgate release that they put out. Thankfully, it's all been, what they had done has been cleaned up and re-released on Blu-ray by Shout Factory. So we've had, you know, ways to reappreciate it and get to know it better and see more better forms of the movie. And the audience appreciation just never stops. It just keeps growing. You know, it's I think a lot of people, and I knew this going in, a lot of people really, really love this movie. They love the people in it. And so I can say I shared that love I have for for decades. So it's all that stuff is important to me. All that stuff's important to capture again.
Sure. And you know, it really comes through in the book because you mentioned a minute ago the sense of atmosphere in the movie, but you really capture that on the page too, because much of this is set down in the mines and it does feel dark and dank and claustrophobic. And I think that that really adds to the experience, whether you're watching the movie, whether you're reading this book, because you do almost feel like you're down there with them, and it's kind of frightening. So I just wanted to say that I really enjoy the atmosphere of this book. It translates incredibly well, which is, you know, a compliment to you as the author. And it sounds like, yeah, we have a bit of a shared history because it's funny, people who knew me as a child and people who know me now cannot reconcile the fact that I am a horror geek, because I was literally afraid of everything as a kid, went out of my way to avoid all of the slashers, and it was Scream for me. That was like my generation's, you know, thing. And it was the same thing. I didn't see it in theaters because I was like, no. And I watched it on VHS and I decided, wow, I think maybe I like being absolutely terrified. And so Scream 2 was my first, you know, in theater experience with that type of movie. And I've been sort of ravenous ever since. So I can appreciate you, you know, coming at it from a distance, you know, maybe a few years later, and then saying, hey, maybe this is for me after all. But I digress. You know, I do that a lot. And, you know, Anthony Mackie, if you could somehow get the rights to the Scream movies, I always think those would be the most amazing novelizations, or the Gail Weathers books, and it just, you know, hasn't happened. But, you know, the Woodsboro Murders by Gail Weathers and Armando Muñoz, just putting that out there.
Oh, you know, my gosh.
20 years down the line.
I'm a Scream fan too. Especially too, where they brought that book in.
Right. I loved it. That was just awesome for book lovers, you know, to have that in a horror movie, because then you get your horror and your books, which is terrific.
Hmm.
So anyway, I will get back to this book and this story now, but you mentioned the incredible collaboration that you had with the director, George Mihalka, and I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate a bit on what that process was like. He does contribute, you know, a foreword to this book, and he talks about his conflicted relationship with the movie, because he had a vision that didn't come to the screen, at least not fully. Much was cut, much was lost, as you said. So you two working in collaboration sort of brought that all out. So can you tell us, you know, what meeting him was like, or collaborating with him was like, and how did that relationship evolve as this book came to fruition?
He was a joy, really. He's so open about everything. And it wasn't just, well, first we dissected every element of the story, and how we perceived everything, from the characters to the setting to the atmosphere to the murders, and but it wasn't just that. Another thing he brought for me, which was really important, was a lot of production stories of the film. The details he was able to provide about being in that particular town where they filmed, um, were important. Those stories were important. And his own sensory details of what being and shooting down in the mines was like. He has never been a coal miner, but he's filmed a movie down there. And so he has some experience with all of it. And his impression also of the town was very important, because what I ended up doing is Valentine Bluffs. It was filmed in the Canadian coastal town of Sydney Mines in Nova Scotia. And I decided to base the deep history of Valentine Bluffs on the actual city it was based on. And so I did a lot of real research into the Sydney Mines and incorporated that into the city that we see. So thankfully, George had lived there for some months, and got to make this movie with everyone and got to know the locals. He brought so much information to me to work with, and he was very open. Anytime I had a question, I could shoot him an email, or we could hop on Zoom together and talk face to face. And sometimes it was big things, and sometimes it's just little details, tiny little details, which really helped fill it out. What bands were the Canadian youth listening to in 1981, and what would they most likely have on cassettes to play at a party where they're all trying to score? Those details are important. I had to get the right bands. I got some of them right, and then George informed me, they would also be listening to this and this, and so very helpful in anything I needed. So, he got to be very involved through the whole process. I mean, it was wonderful to have him to bounce,
Right.
ideas off of, and there were times where I felt I was I just wanted to get his approval that if I approached something in a certain way, he would be okay with it. Sometimes details about characters, but I got to say, I was really careful to craft this vision that he wanted, but at the same time, he was so incredibly, unbelievably giving and open to letting me bring my voice and my ideas to the book on who these characters were and what their histories are and what the history of the town is. And there were very specific questions and ambiguities within the movie that we knew we wanted to tackle within the book. A big one is, what was TJ doing when he disappeared for a year? That is almost the big question that everybody asks. They want to know, why did he abandon town? What happened to him during that time away? And we knew we had to completely fill those questions in.
Right.
And he let me run with it. And it's just an incredible freedom that he allowed me to tell this story, and also make it to kind of carry the flame of it, creatively. So, I mean, what an opportunity, at the same time, fulfilling his vision. It was really an interesting collaboration for us both. And I think we both were very satisfied where we ended up and
That's
what we
excellent.
delivered with this book.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a really true and great collaboration, because so many times, you hear the horror stories about people who have very conflicting visions, and then nobody's really happy with the final product, which is versus something like this when everybody seems really pleased with it. Um, and I will say too, you mentioned the telling details, and they really do make all the difference, because then you capture that sense of authenticity, and all of a sudden, you're transported from 2023 to 1981, which is pretty radical. I mean, I felt like I was living in the year before I was born, and I don't always have that experience. But so let me ask you too. I wanted to ask you about the things that you can expand on in a novel that you can't necessarily do in a film. As you said, horror movies tend to be 90 minutes. If you're really lucky, you get 2 hours, but it's a lot of showing and a lot of things that are implied, but you can't fit a lot of backstory or character development in. I mean, one of the most common criticisms I think of horror movies is, yeah, there's no character development, but then you have a book like this and everything gets fleshed out. So can you talk about how the book and the film together create sort of an enhanced experience for the fan?
Yeah, one easy way to kind of approach this is to approach it from the very opening of the movie and the book. And we all know the pre-title sequence in the film is a very shocking murder scene. And it plays pretty quickly on screen, and it's really creepy, but it's very ambiguous. We do not know who the first victim is. We do not know why they are killed, or why they're killed where they're at. There's a lot of titillation and sex and violence in that opening scene in the movie, but we don't get much more than just that kind of feel and setup of what we're going to experience. I could not approach that the same way in the book. Everything had to be explained immediately. And so I had to establish an opening character, and we had to get to know her. And then we had to learn to care for her and see how she ended up in this peculiar situation that puts her down, having the secret rendezvous down in a mine that doesn't allow women, and in the middle of the night when nobody's around. And everything had to be explained and set up in a realistic fashion that put her down there. And we know where this opening scene or chapter is going to end, and then to kind of actually build sympathy and create suspense out of what we know is coming. All of that was a very intense endeavor. Like, there was so much restructuring and foundation that needed to be built just to tell the opening scene.
Right.
And so that's the kind of way I had to elaborate and take what was there in the foundation and build a satisfying novel out of it. But that's the great thing about a novel, is we get to spend more time with everybody and understand their motivations. And my particular style of writing is I approached every chapter with a perspective of one of the characters. We're in their head, we're thinking their thoughts, and we get to know them and all their experience, and then we experience the story through their eyes. And so that's the way I kind of approached the book, as opposed to just being a narrator,
Right.
saying what I see. I'm kind of going into the people and then giving what they're perceiving. And it it was great that I got to be everybody in
Right.
this story. Like, I got to really understand, and I already liked all the characters. I already cared for them, but now I got to really get to see what makes them tick. And and sometimes there were new characters that had to be introduced, or peripheral characters that had to that needed history to make sense if they appear in the book. And I'll give another example of how things needed to really be elaborated. Um, there is a Dave, kind of the town bad boy, with his black leather jacket, and you can tell that the chief newbie's got a thing for him. You know, he's always on his back. And when he, you know, as most of the characters do, dies in this book, there is a moment when the news breaks at the party and everybody gets hysterical. But in particular, there was one woman, there's this one young woman who we've seen kind of in the periphery of a lot of shots. She just freaks out, screaming, "No, no!" And she's like, her whole world has been destroyed. But we never actually saw them talk before, you know, up until that point. Like, I didn't know they were dating. And then, you know, so I had to really kind of start looking at where they interacted in the background. And then I actually saw there was a whole story with those two that never made it to the screen, but it's actually there between the characters. Like, the moments that they have together in the book are these peripheral things we've witnessed. But I think a lot of people may not have actually seen those things before, but you can now go back to the movie in the bar and see these scenes where, you know, she's hanging over his shoulder and he's reading a book, trying to like get away from her. And I'm thinking, oh, there's a lot going on between these two. But I had to get to know her, and she needed a name, she needed a function in this story, and then she has a resolution. Like, you know, the book really gave me this opportunity to take what was there, but build upon it in a much more satisfying way. Again, you know, it's filling in those blanks and getting to know everybody better.
Sure, and it was a really satisfying reading experience as well. You know, you mentioned how you alternate chapters in different characters' perspectives, and I loved that because, you know, you really develop an emotional connectedness with these characters, and you do get to see their inner lives. And, you know, even people you might have suspicions of, you also have a bit of sympathy for them. And so I think it makes it, you know, a much fuller, richer experience when considering the movie. And I've said this, you know, a time or two before, but I think the same, you know, about the new Halloween trilogy, which has been sort of very divisive. People love it, people hate it, people don't know what to think of it. But, you know, each movie got its own novelization, and each novelization was pretty incredible. And I think that, you know, if you read the books and then watch the movies, you have sort of an entirely different appreciation for the story, because you have all of those ambiguities filled in for you, and you can appreciate more, you know, what was maybe trying to be done that just couldn't necessarily be captured within the constraints of a film, whether that be visual constraints, time constraints. But I think that people who read this book and watch the movie will have a different and more full appreciation for that story. So again, I digress, but I wanted to say that because I think it's really true, and I'm sure that you've been hearing from, you know, readers who are very enthusiastic about that they are liking that deeper experience.
You know, the book's just getting out, so I actually have not received much response yet. We're still kind of waiting for the reviews to come out and see how people really go. But I mean, the enthusiasm to get the book is definitely there, more than we expected. But, you know, I think the fans are going to appreciate the fuller experience of this. I mean, it is, I've read plenty of novelizations, and some of them do feel like padded screenplays, or they don't get too deep into it. And our approach really from the get-go was, let's get as deep as we can within our allotted number of pages, and see if we can make people fall in love with these people all over again. And I did. I fell in love with them all again, and I felt scared for them again. I don't know how, but I did.
But that's pretty incredible, you know, 42 years later to again be that invested in the characters and in the story. And I will say, what I've seen on social media, people are just absolutely, freaking out about this book. They're loving it. I should probably have mentioned earlier that this is sort of a limited edition print run. It sold out super quickly, but we should mention that, people have not purchased this book yet, but are going to want to, that there are plans for it to be reissued in different formats, if you wanted to speak to that quickly.
Yeah, they're definitely talking Stop the Killer and the licensor and everybody's looking into how we can get this out more to everybody. I mean, we want the book to be available, to everybody who wants to read it. Again, we were caught by surprise by the overwhelming initial response. And again, that first edition hardcover run sold out. But I know there's talking going on right now on how we can get more of it out. So unfortunately, this Valentine's Day, there's a limited number out there for people to experience it. By next Valentine's Day, hopefully everybody will have access to it and will have, for a while have had access to it and then can reread it if they want.
So this year,
recommend
you can play the game, rewatch the movie, or discover it for the first time if you haven't seen it. And then next year, be on the lookout for the book again.
It won't be a year wait though. We're going to get it out as fast as we can because people want to go back. So
yeah,
we're very thankful.
Yeah, it's great to get that kind of response. So all right, I'm gonna sort of take you back in time now, and we'll get a little bit broader in our conversation, move away from My Bloody Valentine a bit. But I did want to ask you, in more general terms, if you can recall, what first drew you to writing, and why does horror in particular appeal to you and your sensibilities?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think there was a seed that was always there. It goes back as long as I can remember. I mean, when I got my first Star Wars book, like not a novelization, although the Return of the Jedi novelization in '83 was my first novelization, and it is still on my shelf.
That's great.
Most of the ones after, though, became horror novelizations. So in a way, even when I had those first like children-based Star Wars books, I was rewriting them. Like I would come up with new character names and I would try and come up with subplots. And so I can look back as far as I can remember, and it was something I did to entertain myself when I was in my bedroom as a little kid, be writing. Kind of strange, but somehow it stuck with me all these years. And then, that once the horror bug bit, things changed definitely. 1985 or the very late 84. And a big part of it was picking up my first Stephen King novel. And that was Cujo. And I picked up the paperback. The cover was ominous with the poster art of the fence with the blood. The book's just like right over here. I mean, not down here in the mine.
In the mine.
Close. That very first paperback I picked up. And I was hooked. I mean, that first year I must have read 6 or 8 of his paperbacks. I was just going through them. By 86, it was the first hardcover that I bought, directly first release. And so, and by that point, I was already hooked into Clive Barker. And I was reading Fangoria religiously, immediately. Once I started picked up the first issue in 85, every issue since, I would get right away off the newsstand. So again, it was intense, that deep dive into King and Barker at that era. Like it was just such an incredible awakening. And, there were other authors I read as well. I always go back to those two, though. King and Barker were really such an influence at the right age.
Sure.
But
yeah, those guys.
It took a while, though, before I actually took a shot at it, at writing books. I wrote screenplays for decades before I had the confidence to approach a novel. And it was actually a longtime friend who suggested I had a particular screenplay called Hoarder. And they said, she says, gosh, this would make a great novel. And I thought about it, and I thought maybe it's time. And I could see how I could get lost in that story. And I tried it. And now I just can't stop. So it's been a long journey, but once I started Hoarder, it picked up really quick, and then I was on to Turkey Day and Turkey Kitchen, the follow-up. And there was even a point where I was working on all three at one time, polishing and putting out the first one as the second one was going through polishes and the third one's being started. And I just kept everything going. And I know I'd never give it up. Yeah, once a bit, it just didn't stop. But I had years on my typewriters, and
Right.
I can think back in high school, my senior year of high school. I wasn't doing anything with the school. I was creating my first fanzine. And I lived in a small town, but I was doing a horror fanzine, which was like a Fangoria done on the typewriter. But I was really ambitious, and I went to the local library and found an LA phone book. I don't know why a small town in Nevada would have an LA phone book, but they did. And I would look through the names, and it's like Sam Raimi. I'm going to give him a call. Why was he in the phone book? But all these great 80s horror creators were in the phone book. And so I'd call them up, and they all thought, who's this kid who's calling me? I'll give him an interview. Very few people denied me an interview. I can tell you off camera who did. But most people were so generous and encouraging and would give me interviews. And I spent all my money that I made working as a projectionist, as a teenage projectionist at a movie theater. Put all the money into printing hundreds, if not thousands, of copies of this fanzine that I created, like 48 pages for the first one, 56 for the second one. Like everything was being put into these, and I was writing most of it. I had a co-writer on the first issue, and then just took the second one all, solo. And so I guess, it's just never stopped. It's from rewriting those Star Wars books, and to now, it's just, it never stopped. It just changed formats.
Right. What a great story, though. I mean, it's obvious that you are doing what you love and that you were meant to be doing, and you've really been doing it all along. Maybe now you have a bigger audience, but that's incredible. It just, for the young ones out there, I will say, you mentioned typewriters and phone books. So just for your information, typewriters predated laptops and phone books predated the internet, and look it up. That's all you need to know about those things.
I haven't thought of that. Oh my gosh.
That's scary.
I'm still in 1981 here.
So I know. I live in the 80s and early 90s, I swear. Like, sometimes I think it's 2023, and that's frightening. It just doesn't seem real to me. But I wanted to give you an opportunity, too. You mentioned Hoarder, which it's funny you would say that, because I always thought that should be the title of my memoir, but you obviously, got there first with the novel. But Hoarder, and Turkey Day and Turkey Kitchen, for people who aren't familiar with those books, would you mind just giving us a real quick introduction to those three titles for people who read My Bloody Valentine, or who are waiting to read it and want to get acquainted with your earlier works?
Yeah. Hoarder was, again, it was just based on a script that I had, but it's a very kind of simplistic setup, but it has a very elaborate execution involving four teenagers who, for reasons that are entirely justified, break into the home of the local hoarder in their town late one night when they believe she is not there, because she's stolen things from all of them. She's also a klepto, and she has a reputation in town, but she doesn't take property, she takes animals too. And so it's kind of a rescue mission. These kids they've been wounded by this woman, they want what is theirs, and they take a late night journey, a secret journey into her house. But pretty much immediately they are trapped, because it is the hoard house from hell. It was, and the whole book is is basically being trapped and trying to escape. Oddly enough, kind of reminds me of being lost in the mine and trying to get out. But unlike My Bloody Valentine, where it's the final act, where they're trapped in the location, the whole book of Hoarder, you're trapped in that hoard house. When you open that book, you're trapped in the house pretty much. And it's a very, I work on it so long that I kind of become immune to its shocks.
Right.
But it is a super disgusting book, I hear, because it really deals with the reality of the most filthy hoarder you could ever hope to never encounter, no, let alone go into their house. And then when they really do prove to have something bad in here too, it's a really gruesome book, but it's fun. It's not as gruesome as it is and as gross. I don't feel it's off-putting. Like, I definitely have a strong style. I definitely get into some intense violence and gore and horror with my books. All of them kind of escalate the level of intensity and gruesomeness. But I always keep in mind it in a way that doesn't turn me off, which is to say, there's certain trends and things that have come and gone, torture, things like that, things that are so rough that you just never want to go there. That's not exactly my style. I do try and keep things approachable. So, but also give you a thrill, a scary thrill. So, that's what Hoarder always was meant to be, just a fast, quick thrill ride, but it is really gruesomely disgusting, but in a fun way. So that was a fun book. And thankfully, it kind of got some notice, right away. Certainly not a bestseller or anything, but the people who picked it up were satisfied. And I had a one-page piece in Fangoria number 344, which was the final issue that Chris Alexander edited, I believe, which had Elvira on the cover in 2015. And there was a one-page, piece in there about Hoarder. And Chris Alexander said it's dynamite, a sickening, imaginative shocker. And I thought, wow, holy cow, like, I didn't expect that. And
that's better than being a bestseller. I mean,
right, like, that's
like the horror revival giving is their validation.
Yeah, it was a really great thing. And so, I knew I was on the right track. But, I was self-releasing these books since, that's still the way they have gone out. But, I've had the confidence in them and just keep, putting them out for those who really do want to take the chance and take a shot with them. Turkey Day came. It was released 1 year after Hoarder, but I was, again, working on both for quite a while at the same time. Turkey Day is definitely more, it's a longer book, it's a deeper book, it's more elaborate, and it's a more, it's got a lot of deep issues at its core, dealing with real life. It is a holiday, theme day set slasher story. It's got every element we could want. The creative kills, the chases and the reveals, and it's got the murder mystery and a body count that just keeps piling up, and it's all those good elements that we want. And I tried to deliver them in excess for sure. It's a very excessive book to a degree, but it's I think it's pretty scary. Like, it really involves me, and it's much to my surprise, it was a story that could not fully be I couldn't contain it in one book, and I knew that there had to be more. And so that's where Turkey Kitchen came in, which I jumped into right away. Pretty much, it was the book that came out after, but there was still like a 5-year gap between them. Right. But part of that was just, it was so much more ambitious. So I took what was a more contained slasher piece set in one place on one day with a limited cast, a family in a house on Thanksgiving with an unwanted visitor, And I expanded it into a sequel that was nearly twice the length with hundreds of characters. And I really wanted to try my hand at epic plotting.
Mm.
I love big, chunky books. I love it. Nothing makes me happier than when Stephen King or Clive Barker comes out with a new book and it exceeds 600 pages. If it exceeds 800 or 1,000, I'm happier. That's just the way it is. Like, my favorite books are those big books that you totally get lost in. I wanted to take a shot at that. And I believed Turkey Kitchen had a story that needed it. Like, so many characters and deviations in the plot, while still fulfilling the checklist of everything we want out of these slashers. So that one just really goes. I really had hoped for 600 pages. I ended up with 565 or so. So I got really close.
Pretty close.
But I did actually go over and cut it back.
Right.
You know, there's always a lot of editing. So
Sure.
the story's still not fully told. So there will be a third book. But I needed to get a little distance and take
Sure.
time to develop it, because the third book will probably be the length of the first two books combined.
Oh, nice.
So maybe I'll finally get to that.
It will be that epic.
The pages and 4 digits. Like, maybe.
It can happen. I've decided, that is going to be my November reading, Turkey Day and Turkey Kitchen, because I am one of those people, like, holiday themed stories just do it for me. So that is very exciting to me. The one thing that scares me about thick books, I agree with you. I love nothing more than one of my favorite authors write something like really, really huge. But I tend to do most of my reading in bed at night with like the book over my head. Things terrify me because I know there will come a day that I drop it and break my face. Like, it might be your book. It'll be the third Turkey book. It does me in.
Yikes.
Yes, you want to hold that distinction, right? So just 2 more questions for you, if you don't mind, and then I will let you back to the mine. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that it took you a while to find the confidence to really embrace writing in sort of a more public way. So in reflecting on a writing life or a creative life, what do you think is the best advice that you were ever given? And then the flip side to that coin, the best advice that you were never given and had to learn for yourself throughout the process of actually doing the work.
Oh, gosh. I don't know if there's any better advice that could be given than do it if you love it and don't stop. And I've heard that from numerous people, but there have been a few people who've been very encouraging, to me over the years. And I've got to once again say Clive Barker, who thankfully kind of has been a mentor of sorts over the years, and has really offered just nothing but encouragement and advice. And when you have somebody like that, telling you just commit to your vision, like, do it your way, don't, and don't stop. And, I knew that I would be doing this no matter what and I have been. So, whether the success comes or not, you just keep to your vision, keep going. And, a lot of people have offered me a lot of encouragement over the years. And, but, a lot of it's been from, I've thankfully been able to put myself in a position to meet many of the creative people who I've admired over the years. I mean, going back to that fanzine, because I was interviewing directors, and writers. I struck up a friendship. Here was a very important early mentor to me, was Mark Patrick Carducci, who wrote Pumpkinhead, and a television movie called Buried Alive, which had Jennifer Jason Leigh, I think, maybe Tim Matheson, but and he also wrote Neon Maniacs. I think that was his first produced screenplay. Unfortunately, we lost Mark in the late 90s, I believe, prematurely, which was so sad. But I met him at a Fangoria convention. The first one I went to was in 1989. And we kind of struck up a friendship, and he was very encouraging to me. And I interviewed him for my fanzine, which is called The Fright Factor.
Love it.
And I still have all of my old recordings, all the interviews I did on cassette tapes. And it would be great to actually compile them into a book in the future. I have some incredible late 80s, early 90s interviews with some genre greats. But Mark was very specifically encouraging to me to write. And he kind of became a friend of mine. And when I would come to Los Angeles to visit, usually for horror conventions or events, we would always meet, and he would give me encouragement. He had me to his house when he was directing his documentary about Ed Wood. I think it was Keep Watching the Skies. And his early encouragement definitely kept me on the path. But also, you know, I'll say a lot of the time then I was pursuing films and making films. And that's certainly not out of my wheelhouse yet. I'm still pursuing films. And I did write and direct a string of short films starting in 1999 for close to a decade. And they toured all over the world. My short films were playing everywhere, and I won a whole bunch of awards. But somehow nobody really big took the notice and put me under their wing. And so that didn't fully launch creatively, but it certainly, I'm still, you know, have plenty of screenplays and, you know, go in that direction. But ultimately they were my stories. And I guess I've always been trying to tell them. So, you know, those people who give, you know, that encouragement, listen to them and give it a shot and do it. Like, I write because it satisfies me. Right. It's very calming. It's a good place to be. I know I have a very vivid imagination that does not stop. So the best thing I try to do is to feed it and foster it and pamper it and let it express itself. That was always the best advice, you know, that you can get, is to just follow it, do it, see where it goes. And it's led me down and to get lost in the Hanniger mine.
Who would have thought?
That's a good place to be.
I know. Would that boy in 1985 have thought that this is where he would be tonight? But that's really good advice, you know, channel it somehow. And I think too, like you said, so many people I think are hesitant to approach their heroes if they have the opportunity to, because it can be a disappointing experience, but sometimes people will really surprise you. And I think that they respond to genuineness and to curiosity, and people can tell, you know, if you're interested for the right reasons. I've had a lot of those experiences myself, like people who I've really admired have somehow become friends, and it's like, what? But it's because they know that you're genuinely interested and you want to learn, and, you know, sort of you are a fan first and then the friendship develops. But I guess you have to have the confidence to make the approach if you have the opportunity to do so. So that was several really good tidbits of advice. And so my final question to you, I have to ask, and you mentioned it briefly earlier, in addition to writing the third Turkey Day book, I hear that there's going to be a novelization of Silent Night, Deadly Night, which again has like the kid in me jumping up and down. So what can you tell us about that? Because I'm sure.
Yes, that's my next novelization. I'm now pretty much gone from Valentine's Day to Christmas land. I'm going to be stuck in Christmas land for a while this year. Silent Night, Deadly Night, there's another one. Somehow I just missed it during its brief theatrical release. I was just starting to get into horror films at that time, but I was still scared of the slashers more than anything. I actually did see the original Nightmare on Elm Street when it was released in late '84, and Silent Night, Deadly Night came out at the same time. But I wouldn't get close to Silent Night, Deadly Night. But I did go to A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then I picked up Fangoria a month later. So it was, you know, it was so close, but I just missed it at the time. But of course, I discovered it on VHS, fell in love with it. It's, you know, I mean, it's such a culty movie and it's got a lot of humor, but you know, seeing it at that impressionable age, it was also freaky. And the what's shocked me about Silent Night, Deadly Night was how blasphemous it was, and you know, it like kind of goes over the edge in many ways with its violence and its sexuality. And like, you know, for a young person, I was like, you know, it was an intense film. It really pushed the limits, and it certainly did not deserve to be banned. It has its fans, and they deserve the right to see it. But it became infamous, and it got yanked. And but again, since the mid '80s, pretty much I've been a fan of Silent Night, Deadly Night, and another holiday classic you love to watch on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And I can't believe I'm gonna be there. Now the fun thing is it's I mean, I would love to do more novelizations. I don't feel I'm finished in that realm. I want to. There are plenty of titles I want to approach, but it's important that they're good stories. And Silent Night, Deadly Night, just like My Bloody Valentine, I feel is a really good story. The other thing that's interesting about it is it does subvert that initial slasher formula to a degree. It's not a murder mystery. We know exactly who is killing for the whole time. You know, it's more almost like Maniac. It's study of a psychopath, but unlike Maniac, Silent Night, Deadly Night, we build great sympathy for this killer, and then he, you know, through circumstance and abuse, goes over the deep end. It's a totally different kind of book. It's a totally different kind of killer, a different kind of madness that I'm going to be dealing with Silent Night, Deadly Night. So that's a joy. You know, it's going to be a big thrill. It, you know, will have a different feel. It'll have a different voice to a degree, and it's more extreme. And you know, that's fun too, because I'm kind of known in my writing for pushing the limits and going overboard, but in a way that's not unappealing or too excessive to not, you know, not work. I'm thrilled. I'm very thrilled by being on Silent Night, Deadly Night now. I love that it's another holiday.
Yeah.
So, you know, basically at this point, I have staked myself out on a calendar, and I'm tearing through the months, hacking my way to each holiday. And I'm going to keep going for a while. I'm not done yet with the holidays. I think I have many things to say with the holidays, and I'm not finished saying those things yet. So I've got some more months to go and some more theme dates to plant an axe in. But thankfully, that's not that and Turkey's Day's third and final book, which I'm not publicly naming yet.
Sure.
But and that one's kind of a little bit further down the road, although it's been developing for many years. I have my first short fiction collection that I've been working on for a couple of years, and it might be ready for release later this year. If not, then I fully expect it would be early next year. But it's pretty mostly complete, and you know, kind of the goal now is to also produce a lot of short fiction.
Sure.
And I've loved short fiction. Like one of the first 3 King books I read was Night Shift. You know, after Cujo, I picked up Carrie, and I picked up Night Shift. And so, you know, it had a big effect early on. And then, of course, my introduction to Clive Barker was the Books of Blood. And, you know, thankfully, Fangoria, you know, I started reading right at the right time. So the moment Clive came on the scene, they were doing interviews and waving the flag saying, this or that guy's the new future horror, not just Stephen King, Fangoria, everybody was behind him. And then immediately those lurid looking covered paperbacks were in the supermarket, like right there in the checkout stand. And so like immediately I was picking up the Books of Blood the moment they hit, and, you know, loving them. Now, strangely, you know, I have a weird way of approaching what I tackle. It took a long time to get the confidence for me to tackle short fiction. I had to write 3 full-length novels before I felt comfortable tackling the short form, which was really odd because I made a name for myself writing and directing short films. But those short film narratives weren't the same kind of stories that would work in a book. They're very cinema based. So the short fiction took a while to gain confidence and to experiment and find my short fiction voice, which is, a unique thing. I don't feel my short stories resemble completely anyone specifically. And as much as I love certain authors, I try to keep a point to not mimic those that I love. I really want to bring my own perspective to things. And so, but now I've got this short fiction. Once the short fiction started, I can't shut that off. So it's a constant influx of ideas and a ever-growing list of stories I want to write in that form. And I'm just about got that book done. And also, it'd be great now to be in the position to have short fiction to submit to other collections. Like I'd really love to start getting, to be in a collections, with other authors I love, right. And to have something good that, can stand, alone elsewhere. That's definitely the next, I think the next big step is to get my short fiction visible. No one's seen it yet. And so I think people will be pleasantly surprised. I'm very happy with doing short fiction now too, but it won't replace the novels as well. I've got, again, the idea machine doesn't turn off. It just,
you were the horror faucet.
It keeps dripping. So that's also coming very soon. I'm still kind of keeping the title of the collection. At this point, I haven't released that, but this year the title will definitely be out. Maybe the first collection will be out, and it does include a novella. A story that started as a short story, but sometimes they grow, and you just go with it, right? And so I like the idea of having a collection that also has a novella in it, which, of course, Clive Barker did as well. And I love that. So it'll be fun to become part of that tradition.
Wow, we have a lot to look forward to. This makes me very happy. And, I think you're pinching yourself that you get to write these things. We're pinching ourselves because we get to read them. So, while we're looking forward to all that, people also get to get reacquainted with My Bloody Valentine. Armando Muñoz, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this interview. And I should probably let you turn down that light to make yourself, slightly less easy to find there in the mine. Thank you so much. And a bloody
Thank
good
you for inviting me, John. Thanks. I really enjoyed this talk with you.
That's it for this episode of Central Booking. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.